now it's time for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. We have our very own Dr. Constance Ikoku, who's our anchor with us today as well. Dr. Constance, good morning.
That's right. Good morning, Yolanda. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Constance.
How was your trip?
It was good, thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Yes, we will be looking at those top stories that are shaping the agenda for you today. Let's begin with this day newspaper. In this today, talking about the economy and tax revenues, Adedeji FIRS collected 0.59 trillion naira in 9 months, 47.3 trillion naira in 2 years. And to the PDP, Lamido joins national chairmanship race, picks nomination form today. And Dangote, Africa's richest man, projects over 55 billion naira annual revenue, becoming even richer from refinery as the Afrexim Bank considers fresh $5 billion expansion credit. Then let's go to leadership newspaper. Analysts upbeat as Dangote refinery begins expansion to 1.4 million barrels per day. Nigeria records $50 billion cryptocurrency transactions in 1 year, and resident doctors to start indefinite strike from November 1. Vanguard, NECA man Nasima rejects Senate NCITF takeover. I'll sack incompetent contractors according to Edo Governor Okpewolo. Enugu Governor arrests man for defiling his 2 daughters. And Essex Holdings gross earnings up by 13.8% to 2.5 trillion naira. Abuja Enquirer, FCT to indigenes to Tinubu declare Wike sole administrator. Islamic police arrest 25 over alleged gay wedding in Kano. And Constitution Review, NAS Joint Committee approves creation of 6 new states. Daily Independent, hard times linked to deepening credit crunch, monetary tightening. And there's a scathing a front page editorial there, stemming the gale of defection. Nigeria risks $15 billion revenue shortfall as U.S. crude prices fall by 17%. New Telegraph, service chiefs removal, revised HTSCOS provides for 2-year tenure investigation. Unmet demands, resident doctors going on strike, and Anambra Guba voting to take place in 5,718 polling units. We also have the Punch newspaper for local papers. Moving on to the Punch, 500 generals forced out despite rising insurgency. That's under President Buhari and Tinubu, talking about the latest reshuffling in the military. Then economic recovery has begun, says Edu. The Guardian, 767 local government areas without active websites amid autonomy. 3 trillion naira yearly windfall. Fragile structures egos derail opposition as PDP fumes SDP splinters. And moving on to the international headlines. Let's start with Daily Express. Tax rises will result in higher food prices. The Daily Telegraph, billions wasted in migrant hotel chaos. And Andrew faces public finance inquiry over rent-free Royal Lodge. The Guardian, NHS needs extra £3 billion to avoid rationing care, Reeves is warned. And 2 men arrested over theft at Louvre, that's the theft in Paris, at the Paris Museum. Metro.co.uk, Health Secretary's candid assessment, worried West voters are in despair. iNewspaper, number 10, in talks to water down Day 1 workers' rights amid new growth warnings. The Times, billions lost to flood hotel deals for migrants. And you have that photo of Katy Perry and former Prime Minister of Canada.
Yes,
Justin Trudeau. Yeah. Interesting.
They've
confirmed, yes, they've confirmed their relationship. And finally, Financial Times. U.S. expects Beijing to delay rare earth export curbs as trade truce hopes rise. All right, let's return to this day newspaper to begin our discussion. Let's see, the Adedeji FIRS collected 22.59 trillion in 9 months, a lot of money, and then in 2 years collected even more. We also have, there's another story that is counter to that actually. If we pull up the Daily Independent, there it has an opposite story. Nigeria risks $15 billion revenue shortfall as U.S. crude prices fall by 17%. So, Benga, on the one side, you have more revenue. On the other side, you have a shortfall. Yeah.
I think it's quite impressive, given the chief taxmaster's performance, the key performance index. If you're just going to base it on just his revenue collection, he has done exceedingly well. 115% improvement since October 2023. And we can see just in 9 months, he scored over 22 trillion naira and 47 trillion naira since October 2023. But I think there is a need to change the narrative and the KPI of the chief taxmaster. I think tax collection should also focus on wealth creation. And that's where the lacuna is. And you could see that the story is coming side to side with the revenue leakage of about 50 trillion naira, the alarm being raised. And that's a bit instructive for Nigeria. And I think that we need to change the reform. We need to add to that reform process of the National Revenue Service that will be taking place in 2026 to include a development agenda. Because if the people are paying so much and you're recording this thing from the taxpayers' money, I think there is a need to have a corresponding development in terms of infrastructure and social services.
So for FIRS, it's not only about tax. There's also revenue from government agencies. So all of that, goes into the pool of what it receives, and what it retains or collects for the federal government.
And Dr. Constance, don't forget, they were saying that it won't be FIRS anymore. It will be under a new name.
Revenue Service.
Absolutely. So we look forward to that and then the changes that it will bring. And I'm actually genuinely worried and concerned about what this means for the everyday Nigerian, because I believe that a lot of people still don't have enough clarity on what exactly these tax reforms mean for our everyday life.
Don't worry, you will get a clarity. Your pocket is going to notice or observe that there is a change from next year.
Interesting times ahead.
Yeah, interesting times ahead, definitely. Let's stay on the economy. The second story in this day, there with Dangote at the top. Dangote projects over 55 billion naira annual revenue for refinery as Afreximbank considers fresh $5 billion expansion. That expansion was announced last week. Now there's a role to be played by Afreximbank, which from this report is contemplating offering a $5 billion expansion credit to the refinery. I mean, this is a massive project. It was already a massive project, and then it's going to be more massive. But let's also zoom in on that role to be played by Afreximbank, because this is an institution for the whole of Africa. So let's pull up New Telegraph. In New Telegraph, we have that photo news. Shows incoming president of the Afreximbank, Dr. George Elombi, and he was being sworn in yesterday by the Nigerian Finance Minister, Mr. Wale Edu. And after the meritorious exit of Nigeria's own Professor Benedict Orama, who held down that position for 10 years. So we're going to be looking at the task ahead for Elombi, but also the period that Orama was there. He led so many projects in Africa, putting Africa's money where her mouth is, if you will, which is what we need. So from $6 billion when he took office, the bank grew to $44 billion as at September 2025. So Orama was certainly rambunctious in the way and manner he ran the bank as it relates to the continent, digging in where necessary, supporting, financing, and Elombi certainly has big shoes to fill.
Absolutely big shoes to fill. And let me also point out that it's very good and positive to see Finance Minister Wale Edun looking strong and healthy. I believe that there were some, concerns in weeks past about his health, but it's great to see him, looking so strong and healthy on that picture. And, the economic integration angle of things is a very interesting thing to look at the moment. We look forward to how this leadership can actually change how things are being done in terms of trade initiatives in Africa, and just generally leveraging Afreximbank's
Yes.
role in how funding is done across the continent.
Yeah.
As well, you mentioned slightly about Dangote and how big this project is, and the partnership that we look forward to and the growth that's going to come with it. Although I do have one concern when it does come to this 650,000 barrels per day to 1.4 million barrels, is that how will this upcoming festive season look like? Usually we have a decline or a shortage that usually comes around the end of year December period. So I'm hoping that we can remain in this positive angle,
Right.
and just keep going until this 1.4 million barrels per day is achieved.
Back to Afreximbank. So, funding has always been the Achilles heel of African countries. Access to finance. We've always
Yes.
had very expensive financing from the international market. So you want to see more institutions like the Afreximbank, financing projects across the continent. You want to see financial independence. That's the catalyst, for projects across the continent, mobilizing our own resources. But also worthy of note, I want to mention the African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, which was set up by Afreximbank. It's for instant, secure cross-border payments in local African currencies. This is a game changer. It will be interesting to see how this grows under the new president, because it's going to help accelerate the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which is about integrating us and trading more amongst us. So currency and payments are very crucial. If you can make payments very easily across the continent, with your local currencies, without waiting for the expensive, international transactions or using the dollar, that's what you want to see within the continent, isn't it, Benja?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
congratulations on the successful exit by our own Benedict Orama, and there's a new work cut out, and that's deepening intra-African trade, which is just still 13%. That's still not strong enough, because it's been proven to be very cost-effective to deepen intra-African trade, for Africans to trade with each other. When we, for the benefit of hindsight, we're looking at Orama's performance. He's clearly spearheaded Africa integration and also powering many African communities, spearheading agricultural reforms and funding the SMEs, which is the key to economic growth, to the roadmap of to long-standing economic growth in Africa. So kudos to him. But for the new
president
man of the Afrexim
Yes,
Bank, he has his work cut out. He needs to strengthen that intra-African trade.
Right.
He needs to also see how he can power many African societies. This will be more. We've seen is the commitment of Afrexim Bank to Dangote, the expansion of Dangote refinery, and I think that is the right step in the right direction. But I think we need a bit of cautious restraint there, so that Dangote refinery will not also get bogged down with loans.
No, there's other refineries coming up. You have the Boa Group refinery in Akwa Ibom. But anyway, let's quickly look at the last story in this day, politics. Lamido joins, no, not, he didn't join. Lamido, he joins the PDP national chairmanship race, a PIC's nomination form today. Last week we discussed this. We already knew that he was in the race. However, all of a sudden, we also heard that news about a consensus candidate in the person of former Minister of Special Duties, Tanimu Turaki, SAN, Adamawa State Governor Amadou Fintiri, alongside some other northern governors, made that announcement. After that, we saw some rejections from some groups saying they were not consulted before that consensus candidate was endorsed. Now, this morning, Lamido is throwing his heart into the ring, picking up the nomination form. Benga, he's eminently qualified.
He is, like we discussed last week, Kabiru Turaki, who was a former minister in Jonathan's cabinet, in the Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, and also Sule Lamido, who was Nigeria's foreign minister, a founding member of the PDP, and also a two-time governor of Jigawa State, very eminently qualified also. And we cannot also push aside Ahmed Makarfi, the former governor of Kaduna State, who was also the chairman of Senate Appropriation Committee, and also who was also a member of the PDP BOT. Three eminently qualified people. But I think that the PDP has learned to escalate matters that should not even get to a crisis level at all. They've shown poor management of issues because you have micro-zoned this process to the northwest.
To the northwest, yes.
To the northwest. And okay, we could flow with that. But when you look at the fact that, okay, you could have also thrown this over, but we said last week that the PDP does not have that that will to sustain an outright voting system, because that might lead to a largely divided party. So because we recommended consensus. But yes, now, in doing this, what the Lamido group are saying is that you could have left it to the Northwest consensus, to the Northwest caucus to decide its fate. And that would show a representation of the interest of the Northwest, but not when governors, because now the narrative is looking like, okay, we cannot control, so let's put someone we can handle, because people know that Lamido is someone who can who is uncompromising. That is the kind of narrative that is brewing from this because why the sudden rush? You could have left it to the Northwest caucus for them to come together and elect their own. It might not even be a Sule Lamido that would emerge as the winner, but in the spirit of transparency and equality. Yeah, that's why I'm saying that it might not even be a Sule Lamido, but you could have done it, since you have micro-zoned it to the Northwest, you could have allowed the Northwest caucus to elect their leader or to reach a consensus on who should be the next chairman. It's
not about control. I don't think it's about control. There is a point to be made about the fact that when it's zoned, then the race should be thrown open so that they contest, and whoever wins, you know. But then picking the consensus candidate where everybody said we're not consulted, that's, you know.
Yeah, but it looks like the gathering of governors now coming together to gang up and push in their own interest. That's what it's looking at. If you look at those who came together to present Kabiru Turaki as the candidate.
Let's see Vanguard newspaper. NECA man Nasima rejects Senate NCITF takeover, warned against politicization of workers' funds. So the organized private sector is at odds with the proposed amendment of the Nigeria Social Insurance Trust Fund Act, which it says is an attempt to politicize management of workers' social protection fund. The amendment has passed the second reading. OPS says if amended, it will expose the fund to undue political interference, and that the fund was founded on the structure of government, employees, and labor, protected from unilateral government control. So the proposed amendment from this report will reduce the influence and representation of workers, who, by the way, form a bulk of contributors and beneficiaries of the fund, while increasing government control through political appointments. I mean, Yolanda, first of all, you know, let's just see, what is NSITF? It's a government agency for workplace compensation, social security, and protection of workers' welfare. Very important. It ensures employees and their families are not left destitute in the event of work-related injuries, you know, illness or death. So it's a very important agency. So there are valid concerns from the organized private sector here. They argue that turning NSITF funds into a political tool will undermine the very essence of setting it up. So they prefer, you know, it remains the way it is. However, this bill has passed second reading. So the question to ask is, how did it get to second reading? This consent should have been, you know, placed earlier on.
That's right.
Than now.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the social comments that I had seen, which pulled my attention was talking about how the governance and autonomy are looking at this from the angle of, rejecting the highlights. It brings so much tension between government and centralization efforts. And, these are very dicey issues, because if you remember a few weeks ago when the New Peng issue was hot on the table, there are so many similarities between what we were saying then and what we're talking about now, looking at how the everyday person benefits from these type of agencies that are supposed to govern the benefits, so to speak, that people are meant to receive. So it's a very interesting perspective, and looking at the economic impact as well of this. What would happen if these become unresolved? What happens to the employee? What happens to their rights?
I think, just to chip in into that, I think there are three main considerations. Because
we don't have time for three main considerations.
Okay, because they are alleging a violation of the International Labour Organization. Okay, I'll leave that to...
No, you can just share one. Yes,
yeah, because now there's the issue of social security, and there's the issue of tripartite consultation, and there's the issue of Convention 87, which is the right for staff to belong and to organize their trade union activities. So
yes.
I think the issue of reform should not be seen as a setback, because the times are changing, the situations and the conditions are also changing. So, but we need to take care of these fundamental issues. That's the tripartite consultation, and the issue of social security, and the issue of the rights of workers to participate and to organize. Those are three fundamental issues that needs to be preserved and protected here.
So it's back to what they are saying. You have to consult them. This is for them. Okay, because sometimes we make laws and politicians do things.
Yeah, I'm just saying that painting it negatively
when they
is not what the narrative should be.
They do things claiming it's for the people, but sometimes you haven't spoken to the people that you are making laws for.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Abuja Inquirer, Constitution Review. Abuja Inquirer, please, if you can pull that up. Constitution Review, NAS Joint Committee approves creation of 6 new states in each geopolitical zone. The Joint Committee will have to transmit final recommendations to the State Houses of Assembly, and that would be before the end of the year. Any amendment must be supported by 2/3 majority of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and then it goes to across the country, 2/3 majority of the State Houses of Assembly, which is 24 states. So that's going to be a very difficult process, but at the same time, creating more states. Let's just oppose this with what the Patriots, a group of eminent elder statesmen in Nigeria, have been talking about recently. On their part, they say we need a new constitution, and they have a proposal ready, saying when we are ready, the country is ready, the National Assembly is ready, they will make that presentation so that we see what to do about that. And then on the other hand, the National Assembly is busy here creating 6 new states. Do we really need 6 new states? And then initially it was, let's create one for the Southeast because they are disadvantaged, they have only 5. Now you're creating 6, 1 for each geopolitical zone. So what problem does it solve?
Again, I want to say it's a fallacy of petito principii. That's begging the question. Because most of these states, we all know that they are hardly financially viable. I think that they're begging the question because what they need to focus on is restructuring in the way of economic growth. But creating new states now will lead to overburdening of many of these new states that are coming up and atomization of the polity. And I think that's an unnecessary distraction in governance. So we need to look at what are our problems? Insecurity. Let's find a lasting solution to insecurity and the economic challenges that is clear to everyone. So I think that it's a misplacement of priority, if you ask me.
Absolutely.
Because it will go the full cycle again.
I agree with Benga on that one.
Okay, Daily Independent, we have on the front page a comment. Not a comment, it's an editorial on defections in the country. Stemming defections, and then at the top left-hand corner, there's the coalition is to stop Nigeria from becoming a one-party state, according to ABC. There's also an inside page story in other papers where some Southeast leaders are threatening to boycott the National Convention if the position of the woman leader, which they say is zoned to the Southeast, is not given to them. According to them, they are alleging that the governor of Oyo State, Seyi Makinde, wants to keep that seat for the Southwest. So they are threatening. I mean, Governor Peter Mba threatened to leave over the national secretary issue. At the end of the day, he made good his threat and it came to the APC. Let's move to the international headlines. Ivory Coast presidential elections. Elections held in that country. We are waiting results. Just like Cameroon, Ivory Coast has a 83-year-old president, Alassane Ouattara, who is hoping to clinch victory. Indications are that he may. More than 8 million people voted in that country of over 30 million. Ouattara seized power in 2011 following a 4-month civil war triggered by the refusal of Laurent Gbagbo to accept defeat in 2010. This will be Ouattara's 4th term in office in a country with a median age of 18. Former President Laurent Gbagbo's wife, Simone, 76, also contested in that election. The youngest candidate was 60 years old. And then, let's not even talk about Cameroon, where, you know, Paul Biya is also trying to extend his rule. And his main opposition candidate, Issa Bakre, is 79 years old.
Wow.
Okay, let's take all the stories and then we'll come to you, Yolanda. And then in Sudan, while the world focuses on Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza, Sudan's wars seem to have been largely forgotten. You know, it's been devastating for the citizens. Estimates say that at least over 150,000 Sudanese are dead and over 3 million displaced by this conflict between the Sudanese government and a paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces. So about 12 million people reportedly have fled their homes. You know, lots of crises there. And yesterday, the RSF seized the army base in El Fasher. So a lot going on there. And then finally, we have Financial Times. The U.S. expects Beijing to delay rare earth export curbs as trade truce hope rises. Yolanda, over to you. President Trump is in ASEAN summit, making deals, you know, while China is closing its door, is busy making deals for other minerals or for minerals that are necessary for the U.S.
Well, let's first touch closer to home and talk about what's happening in Ivory Coast. Now, this is a developing story because the results have not yet been released. But as it is, people are saying that most polling stations didn't have any voters present. In fact, election watchers have reported that there was a turnout of only 18%. That's 18%, which is drastically low. Now, other nations have been responding to what is happening in Ivory Coast, and they've been encouraging the Gen Z, saying, Ivory Coast Gen Zs, stand up, your time is now, you know. But we're in Africa, and the situation is very different. Already we're seeing different cities in Ivory Coast that are already facing violence from people protesting, from mobs. Violence has been, you know, reported in many areas. And unfortunately, critics have been likening this election to what is to come for Uganda next year. So
yes,
yes, you know, Uganda is
most likely.
Absolutely, Uganda is coming up in January. We're expecting those elections, and I think the vibe is pretty much the same, where there's so much uncertainty, but it's still the African story that we keep seeing over and over again, where we have these, you know, really matured in age politicians who are still running to be presidents after several years. I'm trying to be diplomatic, Dr. Constance.
Please be.
And then, like, looking at South Sudan now, it's a very sad. Sorry, Sudan. Excuse me, please. Sudan, the rebel groups that claim capture of the city in Sudan. Now, RSF has an upper hand over the military, actually, because it has lost its major stronghold that was in the Darfur region. That was apparently its 6th Infantry Division in Al Fasher in North Darfur. Now, civilians who have been trapped for more than 500 days are at risk. Now, I'm always going to go back to what I know best, which is the humanitarian angle of things. A lot of similarities between what's happening in Sudan and what was going on in Gaza. We cannot afford to have no food and no medicine in situations of violence and war.
Absolutely.
It's the people that are suffering at the end of the day. And this is another continued abuse of the Geneva Conventions, which are the rules that govern war in nations.
Unfortunate. Thank you, Yolanda and Wenga. Unfortunately, that's all we can take for the paper review this Monday morning.